Well, hey there. You have stumbled into Sister Sharpens Sister, where three sisters get together each week and talk about first one thing and then another.
Welcome back to another episode of Sister Sharpens Sister. And today you will see me. I'm the only sister present today. Our recording on Sunday did not save. I did an update, and it's supposed to save the recordings to my computer, but it didn't do that. So now we're doing it again. Shalon has gone to she's gone out with her husband. So it's just me and Arnie. Arnie Vaughn is a registered and licensed dietitian within the state of West Virginia, and he's been practicing for how long?
Too long. Way too long.
Almost 30 years.
Oof.
Yeah. And you actually specialize in diabetes, is that correct?
That is my primary, yes.
Okay. But you also you work within a physician's office, and she is an endocrinologist. So you also work with people who have thyroid deficiencies and vitamin D deficiencies and things of that nature.
Weight issues and cardiac issues and kidney issues and, you don't get away from it. It's just that the majority of my time is spent in diabetes and really explaining diabetes. But yes, I deal with all nutrition.
So what we've been discussing, as you know, since you were with us last week, is food in America, these last couple of episodes. And when we left off last week, we were talking about who we could speak with if we were unhappy with the food that we currently have available to us here in America. And I'm talking specifically about the food additives. So who would you get in contact with, first off?
Generally, the first place that you always want to start, I would think, in my opinion, is if you are concerned with how, and I guess if you're concerned with how the federal government is handling food and food safety, then you would want to go to your representative, your senator, and express your opinion. That's what they're there for. So either emailing or phone call. Next, probably, in my opinion, is you would want to reach out to the companies themselves and, basically ask, look, I'm looking for a alternative to this because I don't like the fact that A, B, C, D, E is in my food in this product. I like your company. I like your products. I want to buy from you. I understand and, see what you believe in. But the fact that you continue to put these in my food, whatever that particular additive would happen to be, you can say, look, I don't think that I want that in my food, in my family's food. And, if this is something that you feel like you can't do, then I will need to take my business elsewhere.
So would there be any, would it be beneficial in any way to reach out to the FDA directly?
I think any of these organizations are always listening to what are people thinking and what are people saying, and are people saying, look, when my child eats this product, I see these adverse reactions. I see this problem in them, and therefore I am very concerned because what I read says this is not a good ingredient. This is not a good additive. This is not something. And I guess on top of that, it's not something that in other countries they're putting in the food. So why do we have to have it here?
Right.
Can you please do something about this? And I do believe that those people are genuinely looking for what is safe and what is proper. And sometimes they need that directive that this is something where they can put their emphasis in. Because you have to understand that, where the FDA or the USDA are concerned, they're dealing with, in the case of the FDA, they're dealing with pharmaceuticals, drugs.
Yeah.
They're dealing with cosmetics. They're dealing with food. They're dealing with all these different things, and sometimes they, like anybody else, need a nudge to say, this is what more people are really concerned about, and therefore, being an organization of somewhat limited resources, there's only so much that they can do, so much money, so many people, so many things that they can look at one time. Help us focus that.
Right. So what about grassroots campaigns? And the reason that I bring this up is that there's one in particular that blew up on TikTok. But first, I want to mention, and we mentioned this before in a previous episode, about the tuna boycott that started in 1977, because somebody had secretly filmed these boats that had gone out and harvested tuna from the ocean were killing dolphins. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was a very effective grassroots campaign on the part of the people.
Yes.
That changed the regulations and actually brought about the Dolphin Protection Act here within the United States. So the one that I want to mention is, let me pull this up here. Where is it? Yes. It's called Let Them Eat Cereal. And the person on TikTok that kind of got this started, her tag is Tall Girl, but she called for a boycott of Kellogg's. Was it Kellogg's? I think it was Kellogg's.
Yes.
Because the CEO said that they were targeting people who were poor and they needed to have cereal for dinner. How effective, and I'm pointing to my other screen here. That's what I'm doing. How effective this campaign has been, I am not completely aware of, but I do know that for a while there, I couldn't scroll past 3 videos on TikTok without seeing something about this.
But I think a lot of these grassroots efforts can be very successful. We've seen these kinds of things be successful with some of the hormones and some of the antibiotics that were being fed and used with dairy cows.
Yeah.
And has caused a significant reduction. You see that only about 10% of the dairies now are using these products, because primarily grassroots efforts of parents, mothers, fathers saying, I'm not going to use this with my families. I'm not going to buy this product. I'm going to buy something else. And if you want my business, this is what you need to do.
Yeah. Now the Let Them Eat Cereal campaign, I will provide a link to that. And I'm also going to provide some links for some things that we just talked about with that last question with in regards to contacting your senators and your delegates. And we'll put information in there for how you can contact the FDA. But yeah, I'm definitely going to put a link to the Kellogg's thing. I think that's worthwhile for people to look at. So the next thing is, and for some reason, cereal is what comes to mind when I think of this, but it's the fact that one company, we'll say Kellogg's, one company will make a cereal one way for the United States, but they make it completely differently when they ship it over to Europe.
Yes.
Now, I do know that and I looked up the name of it, but I forgot it. The European Food, who are they? It's not the FDA, but it's the European equivalent of the FDA.
Yes.
Okay.
They're the agency that deal with all of the food regulations for the European Union and those countries that are part of the European Union.
Right. And their requirements are a lot stricter than they are here in the United States. Is that correct? Or is it just different?
It's a different approach in the United States. And when food safety regulations were first started, and the kind of the birth of the USDA, and then eventually the development of the FDA, excuse me, they were looking at, I don't know, kind of a broader approach, because at the time that these organizations were founded, companies were, and this goes back into the 1800s and early 1900s, when companies were, I don't know, using even more frightening things in their foods. You saw things like coffee had sawdust in it.
Yeah.
There were, if you ever want to read it, food history in the history of the USDA and the FDA is a fascinating read, because of all the things that were put in, the fact that they used, and this was in, I believe, or in and around World War I, the canned meat that was being processed, they were using not just what we would call preservatives. They were actually, I guess, in effect, mummifying the meat so that they could ship it. They were using the same thing that they use now on dead bodies, to keep the
formaldehyde.
Formaldehyde, yes, yeah. So there's some really, if you think today's bad, you should really see what they were doing years ago. So in that process, they did identify things that from an American standpoint, that are, they use the acronym GRAS, which is generally recognized as safe. So that's things like, if you want to put in salt into canned food, if to help it taste better, to help as a preservative, to help the canning process, whatever you're going to be using that for, sugar, vinegar, in something that's pickled.
Now, is this the European?
This is the United States. So,
okay.
So these are things that we recognize as safe, and they have continued to use that process. What that has led to, unfortunately, is as companies have become more, food companies primarily have become more sophisticated, they're using more and more ingredients and things that are being developed by food scientists, food chemists. So we now see things like preservatives, see things like food colorings, artificial sweeteners, artificial flavors, artificial colors, all of these kinds of things, in an effort to develop what the company believes, and in bringing this out to consumers, what consumers believe are the, I don't know, most desirable product. In other words, they look like they're supposed to look, they taste like they're supposed to look, and they're consistent, whether you buy them here or in California or in Maine, it doesn't matter, and wherever they're fixed, whatever restaurant they come up in, it tastes the same. And because the FDA uses this generally recognized as safe process, what happens is things do not really come under significant review until something happens, until something bad happens. Now, that doesn't mean some of these things are never reviewed. That's not the case, because they do have an active process to look at things and to look at, what's in it, what can it affect? Does it have notable adverse reactions now? Could it potentially cause birth defects? Could it cause developmental problems? They look at these things, but because science progresses faster than regulation, and we can see this in many different places like technology, because science advances faster than the regulations, they're always behind the 8 ball trying to keep up with these things.
Right.
And there are always going to be people that see, this, and see that when my child consumes this problem happens, whether that's hyperactivity or, any of a number of different things. those things aren't always checked out. Now, the European Union has a completely different process. Their process says, you got to prove it to me first that it's safe before I'm going to allow you to put it in the food.
Okay.
So you can go on the internet, and there's all kinds of great examples out there. And they will have the same food, whether it's ketchup, whether it's cereal, whether it's, any number of products. And you can look at the nutrition labels from, America, and you can look at the nutrition label in the European Union, and you will see a noticeable difference in the number of ingredients, the number of things that are allowed, as far as preservatives and artificial flavors and artificial colors and artificial sweeteners and all these things that the European Union says, show me.
Yeah. The one that pops to my mind at the forefront is Fruit Loops, because here in America, I'm not sure exactly how many different colors are in Fruit Loops. There's
4 or 5.
Red, blue, yellow, green, orange. Is that right? 5?
There's 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in Europe, they don't have that. I think they have 3 colors. And it's because they can't use the dye that's used here in America to achieve the same number of colors in Europe.
Yes, because there are several of those that they have flagged as potentially harmful.
Yeah. I'm just curious. Let me see. How many colors of Fruit Loops in America? 6 colors. We have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. I forgot purple.
Okay.
And Australia and UK do not include blue because they don't use the same artificial colors as the American version. But they say that the cereal tastes the same. And Canadian Fruit Loops do not contain synthetic food dyes because Canada has different regulations than the US for food chemicals. So there you go. They're making it 3 different ways: the Canadian way, the European way, and the American way. That's mind-blowing to me.
This is the way that it goes. And again, it's not necessarily that the FDA in and of itself is the evil empire, but this is also where you see politics enter into it. In the if a certain, and again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of who and what, but if you look at the fact that typically one party favors regulation, therefore more money goes to the FDA, and more research and more investigation and more doing the actual science and the chemistry of this. And then on the other side of that, you see another party has more of a deregulation mindset, and therefore we're going to cut the budget, we're going to cut the number of people, we're going to put someone in charge of that organization that follows what we believe. And again, I understand the idea that we want companies to continue to be profitable, and we want them to continue to be able to employ people.
Yes.
Jobs are important. I will not argue that. But trying to find the balance sometimes gets lost because we're more focused on the battle and less focused sometimes on the actual people, and the people that tend to be most significantly affected in these situations are the people that are at the lowest end of the financial spectrum. They tend to be in places where there's not only an issue with finances, but there are issues with availability, what we call food deserts, where there's not really something like a Walmart, a large grocery store. There are, and again, I would not say that it's a total loss, but they deal with a convenience store, or they deal with a bodega, where there's those owners of those establishments can only carry so much. And They're not going to typically carry a lot of perishables. It's going to be shelf stable things where they're not worried about losing money on it.
Yeah.
And those tend to be the things that often are the highest in additives. They are the ones that are most highly processed. They not always have any nutritional benefit, and sometimes have a nutritional deficit.
Right. So if you had to lay the blame, where would you put it? Would you put it with the people for not standing up and making sure something happens? Would you put it with the politicians and the lobbyists, citing like big pharma or something like that, the big food manufacturers, or would you lay it, directly at the foot of the manufacturer?
I think it is, and this is why things move so slowly, and this is why things don't tend to happen in a way that we would like to see them happen, is because there's blame everywhere, and I really hate that word.
Yeah.
Because in one sense, it's not because A, B, or C, it's because there's been a cascade of different things going on. One of which being that we have become much more, and I guess to start with consumers have become much more busy, and whether that's working 2 jobs or 3 jobs, whether that's feeling like our kids have to be involved with 5 different things,
right?
Therefore we're always on the run. So it's a highly processed drive-through, grab and go become the choice,
right?
Because
Yeah.
that's what we have to do. Because they don't know, because we have lost a lot of the ability to do a lot of what I would call scratch cooking.
Yeah.
Even though there are wonderful shows out there, there's all kinds of information on YouTube and TikTok, and the internet has some really great recipes that are not hard to do, but we've lost a lot of that as a society, of the actual cooking and getting in and using fresh ingredients or dried ingredients, using how to cook dried beans and peas and rice and things like that can be very healthy. And then, it moves up the chain to, what's carried in the grocery store. Well, you can't always blame the grocery store, because the grocery store stock what sells.
Right.
And you can go to any grocery store, and if something's not selling, they're not going to carry it very long.
No, it'll be the buggy with the little sign that says $1 per box.
Yeah. So they end up on the clearance rack, or they're shipped out to somewhere where it does sell, or they just don't order it anymore. So you can't always blame them, but they are part of the problem, because they tend to carry these things, and because the price points tend to be very much in favor of, this is cheap for it, and it's quick and it's easy, and all I have to do is add water or something along those lines, and boom, it's ready. And then you go to the manufacturers. The manufacturers want to make money, and they want to make as much money as possible.
Yeah.
So it is in their interest to, going back to that idea of food colorings, it's expensive to try and extract food coloring from a natural thing, from red from beets and yellow from saffron, and all of these things that we kind of get natural food colorings from. It's expensive to get that, compared with, oh look, here's my little eyedropper, and I can put a drop of this in, and it colors 100 gallons of this soup, or whatever it is that I'm making. So therefore, I'm going to use this. You can't blame them, but that doesn't mean that I like it. And then, you roll up the ramp to the regulators, the FDA and the USDA, and the people that set their budgets and give a priority to them, of Congress and the president and all these people that are in charge of the cabinets and all these positions that, you know, are in some cases have our best interest at heart, and in some cases have the interest of those people that are, you know, paying for them to be reelected, in some cases paying for them to, you know, do all these things that, you know, what we call lobbyists.
Yeah.
That are working for the companies that make the chemicals, the companies that, you know, the farmers that grow the food, the manufacturer, or the, you know, I guess the farming conglomerates.
Yeah.
You know, the companies that make all these different things. You know, there's just so many people and so many hands in the pudding that it's really hard to kind of say it's all your fault, it's all your fault, it's all your fault. It's everybody's fault.
Right.
It's our fault for settling.
Yeah. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to you making the best decision for yourself and your family and voting with your dollar.
Yep.
That's where the power is. The power is voting with your wallet when it comes to something like this, something like our food.
And please understand that I never want to point a finger at a family that is truly, you know, they're trying to live within their budget and they're having to make choices about utility bills versus food bills versus you know, doctor visits and all these things that come into life. It's not easy. It is not easy, and it gets harder and harder by the day. So please, I understand, because I deal with clients all the time that are making those choices between, do I buy healthy food, which I would really want them to do, or do I pay for my medicine, or do I pay my electric bill, or do I put gas in my car? And you know, it's especially when they're on fixed incomes that it is extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I was a single mom, 3 kids when we met, and I was there many a time. I would go through the drive-through and get 3 kids meals that all 3 meals cost less than $10 because it was cheaper than going to the grocery store. And that's a sad thing to say.
And you know, your kids are going to eat it because that's what they like.
You know, the food would be eaten.
Yep.
And then they got a little prize.
And mom got a car full of toys.
Yes. I can't tell you how many toys I've pulled out of my trunk at one point. It's embarrassing. So when we go shopping, it would be extremely difficult for the average person or parent to go to the grocery store and either do this before they get there or do it while they're there on their phone and compare the different foods to try to make a good choice.
Well, it's hard enough when you start talking about things like what's best for me as far as protein and carbs and calories and fat and sodium and things like that, that most doctors are pointing at and going, okay, you have a heart condition, you need to watch your fat.
Right.
You have diabetes, you need to watch your carbs. You have, you know, going down that line. When we start talking about additives, you know, how do you tell somebody to judge what's healthiest when they can't pronounce what they're looking at, less, you know, in I guess in a way, trying to figure out what does that mean and what is it, and you know, how much of it is in there and how bad is it for me? Because otherwise, you know, I don't know how many patients I've talked to that go in and they've just found out that they had diabetes, or they just had, you know, heart attack, and you know, the family's trying to go shop for them and buy something that's going to be good for their heart, you know, because the cardiologist really stressed, you got to do this kind of thing. And they're spending 2, 3, 4 and I've heard more hours in a single trip, just standing there with this box versus this box, or this can versus this can, and which one do I choose? And I don't know. And then they've got, 30 things on their list, and they're going down the shelf looking at every single thing of spaghetti sauce or every single thing of soup and trying to figure out what's best. And it's darn near impossible. And then you add this level of, okay, there's 20 different things I can't pronounce on here. I don't know what any of them are. It'll say sometimes artificial flavor, artificial sweeteners, sometimes not.
Yeah.
Sometimes it says it's preservative, sometimes not. And then you've got to figure that out. It's impossible. It's impossible for me. And I studied this stuff.
So what would you recommend somebody do?
Well, there are a couple of apps that I think are really good, at least to help kind of guide some of these decisions. Sometimes not, because sometimes you look at the alternative and it's really, really expensive, but at least lets you get a better idea. And the one that's, there's a paid version that gives you more, but it's free. It's called, and again, I don't know if it's Yucca or Yucca, but it is YUCA.
KA.
KA.
YUKA, yeah.
Okay.
And it looks, I don't know if
No,
this
you're
will
not going to see
focus.
it, but
Okay.
it is in the Google Play Store. It is on the Apple App Store, and there is an absolutely free version.
Yeah.
And you just scan with the phone's camera, but it gives you, based on that, of a score of 0 to 100.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. And then if you look, it actually tells you this is why. It gives you, this is what these things are. It gives you these artificial sweeteners, or these artificial colors, or these artificial preservatives, and these aren't really good, and some hints as to why they might not be good.
Right.
But it also tells you what might be good in it, because this is actually low in sodium. This is low in carbohydrate. This is higher in protein. So it gives you some of those things. And then if you do have things on there, it'll actually give you some alternatives, and they'll tell you, okay, what you picked was, and it was funny because I was looking at artificial, basically the drink packets that you put in water. And I was looking at one that I drank for a little while. I'm trying not to anymore, because it came up as a big fat zero. Okay. So yeah, I'm not going to name names, but there were probably about a dozen alternatives, that went from like 50 up to like in the 70s or 80s, so there are alternatives, but I will say that they were also quite a bit more expensive, because they were bottled drinks.
I see. Okay.
So it's one of those things that you kind of go, okay, well, you know what, maybe I'm not going to use this. Maybe I'm going to try to drink more just water, because that's so terrible tasting. It's a good app.
Yeah, you can actually, like I scanned again. I'm going to see if this will show up.
It's not going to show up.
Oh, wait a minute. What if I do that? Nope, that's too low. Hang on. And okay, there. Ultra Strawberry Dream. That's a monster. And it gave me a 39 out of 100. But what you can do is that you can actually click on the additives. It's telling me that it's bad because of the additives. You can go click on more info on the additives, and it will tell you whether it's hazardous, if it has a moderate risk or a low risk, or if it's risk-free.
There's a second app, and this one actually comes with a subscription, but it's called Go Coco, and it is GOCOCO. So nothing real fancy in the name there, but it is a little bit more involved. It is actually a app and service that were developed by registered dietitians. So I'm always all for that. And the difference there is that they not only help you look at these additives, but they help you look at things like in more detail, things like the carbs and the protein and the fat and all of these different things. And you can actually go down to the level of, look, I have this dietary issue, and they will not only help you with recipes and advice and programs, but it'll look at things like gluten content. So if you have celiac or you have a gluten intolerance, it helps you look at those things, and it helps, so it's, and again, I think the yearly fee was something like $49.99. So not terrible.
As of the date of this recording.
Yeah, for a dietitian service, because you're going to pay more than that going to visit a dietitian, and you're not going to get the same level of information. So I do recommend this.
Yeah. And that was like $50 a year.
Yeah.
$50 for a year.
Yeah. So really not a terrible price, especially if you're really concerned about these things, where you really have something where you have a definite health risk already, and you're trying to deal with this. And then if I can do some things along those lines that are going to help, maybe it's a cancer, it's a heart disease, a stroke, something along those lines, and the doctor said, okay, you need to watch these things. It's only going to help. You're only going to eat healthier. And the great thing is that a lot of times in eating healthier, for one thing, you're helping with other health issues.
Yes, very much so. So what's your number one recommendation right now in America if you are concerned about food additives?
Look, whether you're concerned about food additives, whether you're concerned about, what we call macronutrients, things like carbs or fat or protein, something along those lines. But I think at a basic level, doing more of your own cooking so you can control, this is what goes in.
Right. Okay.
This is how much salt goes in. This is how much sugar goes in. I'm going to control what I'm consuming. And in that, I guess kind of the overarching thought is it's what we call more of a clean eating, less processed, and especially less what we would call ultra processed, things that you just add water to and poof, it turns into, A, B, C, D, E, whether it's a cake or a casserole or whatever.
Yeah, mashed potatoes.
Yeah, but you're making it, and the food that goes into it, and what you've done with it and how it's been prepared.
Yeah.
And that I'm using a healthier oil, or I'm using whatever that looks like, you have more control over that, which means you're getting less additives. You're getting fewer chemicals. You're getting healthier foods. You're cutting down on all these things, especially for, if anybody in your family has anything health-wise, whether that's a child or a parent, grandparent, it's going to be better for them. And it's probably, at least in my experience, it's going to taste better.
Yeah. So learn to cook the real potatoes, use real butter, and make your own mashed potatoes.
Yeah. Control what goes in you. I cannot tell you the number of people that, have made small changes along these lines where they're not, focusing on carbonated beverages and, already processed, bagged cookies and snack cakes and things like that. They're really focused on trying to prepare their food and eat healthier, what it does for weight, what it does for cholesterol, what it does for heart disease and diabetes and stroke risk and GI health, your digestive system health.
Yeah. Cancer risk.
Cancer, all kinds of cancer risks come significantly down when we move towards this.
Awesome. Thank you for speaking with us and
Again,
giving us some insight a little deeper into what we've researched and read. It's really reassuring to hear it come out of somebody whose job it is to help people eat better, to know that at least we know what we should be doing, whether we're doing it or not.
Unfortunately, yes.
But yeah, all right. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Sister Sharpens Sister. We are finished talking about food in America, and next week we're going to be dark, no recording, but I will provide some links in the dibbly-doo down below that you can visit so that you can see other things that we've talked about. I will post one that we talked about how to read a food label. I'll post that one for you, and some other things that we've done in the past. When we come back, we're going to be in October. Woo! Spooky season. Get ready, because we got some exciting stuff coming. Talk to you then. Thanks for joining us on Sister Sharpens Sister. We certainly appreciate you, and if you could, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.